ATP, what it do with your boy Clay? More rain back at you guys with another one, man. Salute to all my subscribers. And of course, if this is your first time tapping into the content, take a moment to go ahead and do that. Of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the thumbs up. So news comes out now. Guys, we've been following this JARON Boots and this Vergil Ortiz negotiation, this open, and unlike just like a lot of these negotiations in the boxing space, especially these high profile ones, they end up getting out on the social media space and they end up being public. Some of them end up being smooth, and of course you have the other ones that end up being messy. And unfortunately, a lot of the times the fights don't end up happening, and I think a lot of it has to do with ego. Obviously, as soon as you start involving the social media space, then people start standing on principles and they start becoming less flexible, and those things end up turning negative, at least towards the idea of a good negotiation happening, right? And this one seems to be going through the same exact stress, but at the same time, very exposing, a big light being shined upon probably one of the biggest issues that we see happening in boxing today. And when it comes to the question about the best fighting the best, we end up usually on the wrong side of that as fans, receiving a lot of excuses and a lot of other fights that we haven't asked for. But every now and then you get one of these situations, right? You get a scenario where the fighters stand tall and they want the fight to happen more than just as much as the fans, or even more than the fans. Obviously, a lot of legacy and a lot riding on JARON Boots, ENNIS, and Vergil Ortiz fighting each other. These guys, missed each other at 147 pounds. We know what happened with Vergil Ortiz. He had some medical issues, cutting weight, almost died, almost ended his whole boxing career. Returned, was able to compete at 154 pounds, and had such a great comeback story, right? Just the 154-pound fights he's had, whether it was that war he had with Serhiy Bodchuk, whether it was the fight he had with Israel Madrimov, whether it was the stoppage of Erickson Lubin, or even the tune-up fights where he was stopping guys pretty much in the first, second, third rounds, right? It is what it is. And JARON Boots Ennis, of course, his own story at 147, stayed there maybe a little too long, some people might argue, but ultimately was able to accomplish some things there, become unified, right? Become a lineal champion. He was able to do that. Now both these guys in the same weight class, it seems natural that the fight should be made, right? Both guys seem to want the fight being made. We saw last year JARON Boots Ennis getting inside the ring with Vergil Ortiz, and that face-off was one of the moments of the year, and made that fight a fight that already had some traction behind it, but made that fight after that face-off even more a high demand for it. But of course, we have to get past the politics and the business. Guys, we saw Oscar Delahoya since the moment that this fight's been announced. He's postured as if he's a confident promoter, or a manager, whatever, promoter. We'll just say he's not the manager, right? Because we know who the manager is. He postured to be somebody who's very confident in his fighter, but ultimately when it comes time to put the pen to paper and make it happen, to negotiate, he puts himself in a position where the space looks at it as, could get it misconstrued as somebody who doesn't believe in his fighter, or doesn't at least want the fight right now. Vergil Ortiz Jr., a man of principle, a warrior, and we held him accountable right here on the ATP Combat Media Show, right here on the Boxing Take. We held him accountable. We said, listen, Vergil, clearly Oscar De La Hoya is not very excited. He's not co-signing, or he's not selling the idea of this fight being the next fight that should be made, as Oscar De La Hoya talked about bringing in Errol Spence, somebody who hasn't fought in going on 3 years. Whenever you see pictures of Errol Spence, he's either hanging out with his family, his kids, or he's on the beach chilling with his woman. And shout out to Errol Spence, who's earned his right to do that and shouldn't even feel like he's under the magnifying glass of having the pressure on him to make a fight happen. But nonetheless, there's no real argument you can make to say that Errol Spence is interested in coming back anytime soon, and nor getting inside of the ring with a Vergil Ortiz Jr. But Oscar De La Hoya would have you believe that this is a fight that is very possible, and that would be the biggest fight, a bigger fight than the fight we all want to see, which is the fight with JARON Boots Ennis. And then he brought up fights with Sebastian Fundora. And listen, Sebastian Fundora is in the midst of negotiating, and from what I understand, getting ready to be announced, a fight that was already pushed out because of an injury Sebastian Fundora had against Keith Thurman. Keith, one-time Thurman, this is supposed to be at the end of March. So he's not available to fight. In essence, if Vergil Ortiz were to wait on the sideline for the winner of Sebastian Fundora and Keith Thurman, he'd be waiting until late summer, right? And I just can't see that happening either. So, you know, the space has just been looking at Oscar De La Hoya. I know me personally, I won't even speak for the space. Me personally, I've been looking at Oscar De La Hoya with the side eye, because at the end of the day, you know, the place that American boxing is in right now, American boxing needs Vergil Ortiz and JARON Boots Ennis right now, right? We need them in the same way we need Teofimo and Shakur Stevenson, who will be showing out in 2 weeks on the 31st, right? So to see Oscar De La Hoya take this position, you have to dive deeper into it and say why. Guys, we know that Oscar De La Hoya is also in the midst of trying to renegotiate and renew a contract or distribution deal with the Zone, as the Zone is shown indifference with the way Oscar De La Hoya has been doing his matchmaking. We know that he's, you know, really been one of the biggest voices against the entrance of Zuffa Boxing with Dana White. He's been resistant and one of the biggest voices against what Turki Al-Sheikh is doing. And he's been doing this for a while, right? But ultimately, what does it come down to with Oscar De La Hoya? Oscar, do you believe in your fighter or don't you believe in your fighter? And you know that this is something that's on the table and it's to be questioned when the fighter, in this case, Vergil Ortiz, and his manager, Rick Meridian, and their lawyers have decided that they want to go separate ways from Golden Boy. They want to get out of the contract with Golden Boy, as Rick Meridian and Vergil Ortiz Jr. want nothing else but to fight JARON Boots Ennis next. And they feel like, from what they can tell, they're way closer than we are, they feel like Oscar doesn't want to make the fight, that he's actually getting in the way and stopping the fight from happening. And that right there, and maybe in ways things are being handled, as far as like with the network deal, the way things are being handled with the transparency, Rick Meridian and the lawyers on that side of the conversation, on Vergil Ortiz's side of the conversation, seem to believe they have enough evidence to prove breach of contract in multiple different ways that should give them a way out of the agreement they have with Oscar De La Hoya. Of course, Oscar De La Hoya feels his own way about it as well. But you know what? Let's not take my word for it. Let's see what Oscar De La Hoya has to say about it.
Contract. I mean, this is the same Vergil who took negotiations. And of course, this morning we wake up and here's a lawsuit from Vergil Ortiz claiming he wants out of his Golden Boy contract. I mean, this is the same Vergil who told Ring Magazine, 2 months ago, that he couldn't be happier at Golden Boy. So what happened since then? Vergil's team hired a new attorney who is also Canelo's attorney, the same guy who sued to get Canelo out of his Golden Boy contract. Does that sound fishy to you?
Now, Oscar would, once again, this is Oscar painting with a broad brush, right? Painting a picture that the same lawyer that Canelo Alvarez used to get out of an agreement with him being used with Vergil Ortiz is suspicious, right? I don't think so. I think what's more suspicious is that you are building up a track record. Clearly, you're building up a track record and consistently getting into it with your biggest stars, and they're always looking to get out of a contract with you, right? Ryan Garcia in the same situation. Vergil Ortiz finds himself in the same situation. And what's the issue? And clearly what it comes down to is Oscar De La Hoya trying to protect his best interest, trying to keep his fighters undefeated as long as possible so that he can capitalize as a promoter to make sure his fighters are available for the biggest fights, therefore the biggest purses, right? I mean, that's what it looks like, at least. We could be getting it wrong, but that's what it looks like is very consistent with Oscar De La Hoya at this point. Now, at this stage of where Oscar De La Hoya is with the Zone and Golden Boy, you would think he would be more, I don't know, I guess you can see from both directions, right? Because if he is in the middle of negotiating with the Zone, maybe he wants to keep this fight in his pocket as something he can leverage when negotiating at the table with the Zone to make the bigger distribution deal going into the future. Maybe that's what it is, right? I don't know, but let's see what else Oscar has to say.
But this is all Rick Meridian's agenda. I was just trying to make more money for my fighter. A 60-40, I believe he deserves it. And that's the reason why you want out of your contract? It just proves your agenda, Rick. Look, Vergil and his father are really nice people who don't deserve to be.
So what exactly is the agenda? He says, so Oscar's saying this proves the agenda. Well, what is the agenda? I mean, guys, share it in the comment section. Let me know what is the ultimate agenda, the devious, what is the underlying agenda that Rick Merigian has outside of what he's making clear. Yeah, the agenda is we want to get out of an agreement with you. And listen, we can add to it and say that we want to get out of an agreement with you because we don't like the way you're promoting our fighter. So outside of you not doing your job well in front of them, outside of that, outside of the fact that they don't like the way you're moving the conversation and the negotiation for them, and that you're closing the doors to transparency, you're not allowing him to be part of the negotiation, you're not allowing him to be at the table when this is being put together. Yes, there is an agenda there. Clearly, there's an agenda there. The agenda is pretty clear that Rick Merigian and Vergil Ortiz Jr. does not want to be in a partnership or in a management deal with you in any kind of way. They don't, the same way Canelo had that, the same way Ryan Garcia has it, right? But outside of that, is there a deeper conspiracy than that? And I wonder if he's trying to point at that or maybe make us feel that's what it is. I'm not too sure. Let's see what else he says.
In the middle of Rick's bullshit. Vergil just wants to fight and not deal with the drama. Because I know him. He's a fighter. Look, and if the Saudis want to buy the fight, trust me, they will buy it. I just finished making a deal with them for Ryan Garcia versus Barrios next month. Look, they don't choose their favorite promoter. They choose the best fights to put on. And look, it's unfortunate that anyone can file a lawsuit in America without basis or facts.
Yeah, and if you notice, he's definitely reading from something and he's trying to play it off like he's articulating his thoughts clearly, but clearly this is written. And I guess there's really no problem with that as well. And, he is performing for the camera. And I think that's a big thing that's been happening with Oscar De La Hoya is that he's been doing a lot of performing. And I think at this point, it's become transparently clear that he's a very artificially flavored type of personality, right? And it's kind of hard to deal with somebody who can't just speak from an authentic space, who has to deliver it the way he's delivering it. But look, I'll tell you this. He brought up a point about making a fight with Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia and him working out a deal with the PBC for that. Listen, we don't know. Everything isn't, when you're on the front looking at a store, it could be a racket and there could be a whole lot of things going on in the background. I know Ryan Garcia happens to be, the last time I checked, at least Ryan Garcia was in a multiple fight deal with Ring Magazine, right? With the Ring, with Turki Al-Sheikh to be more direct. And we see, even with Teofimo Lopez, somebody who's, crossed Turki Al-Sheikh in different ways, how, Turki's come full circle and is, putting this fight together that's coming up in 2 weeks with Teofimo and Shakur Stevenson. So we don't know exactly how that relationship is working. And I would say more so that fight is happening because of the relationship that's between Ryan Garcia and Turki Al-Sheikh. I think it's pretty much known across the space that, there is a little bit of indifference between Oscar De La Hoya and what Saudi Arabia has been doing in the space. He's been one of the biggest voices against their movements as far as rolling out Zuffa boxing, as far as their position on trying to amend the Ali Act, or even knocking down the fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. Just being one of those guys, one of those voices that weren't on the side of Turki Al-Sheikh as he was trying to put together some events. So is there an argument there to say that that Oscar De La Hoya's presence is a nuisance, is a blockage, is a legitimate legitimate distraction to what Vergil Ortiz is trying to put together? If his presence there is forcing Turki Al-Sheikh to reassess the whole entire situation. Keep in mind that Turki Al-Sheikh at one point or another was trying to coordinate Terrence Crawford to fight against Vergil Ortiz Jr., right? And we saw Oscar De La Hoya shake Turki Al-Sheikh's hand on camera. And literally before the sun came up the next morning, after Vergil fought and won his fight, he was already on the other side of Vergil, will do what he wants to do, and he wasn't looking to push that fight next. There's other fights that Vergil could be in. So, like I said, a very artificially flavored personality Oscar De La Hoya has. You can't really take what he says on face value. You got to kind of weigh out his interest, his vested interest in particular, and see if that aligns with him standing behind his word. Because ultimately, unless it's on paper with Oscar De La Hoya, like binding documentation, you can't really count on him to stand on what he says. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that and see that for what it is, right? And obviously the fighters like Vergil Ortiz, Ryan Garcia, and the Canelo Alvarez's have probably have a better understanding that just of the fact that they've been hands-on when it comes to working with Oscar De La Hoya. But let's let Oscar close it out and let's see what else he says.
Simply for the optics. But that's what this is. And whoever's going to interfere with our existing contract with Vergil Ortiz, we will take aggressive action against you. He is not a free agent, and we will prove that. And by the way, if you hate clapback, you're likely the topic of the week, and you're the problem in boxing. Have a great day.
Yeah, very, very artificially flavored, right? And I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, Oscar can say whatever he wants to say, right? He can take the position that he's taken, but I think the reality and the truth about the situation is that Oscar De La Hoya, with Oscar De La Hoya, is that Vergil Ortiz doesn't want to do business with you anymore, just like a lot of other fighters. And I think this is an inopportune time for this to happen for Oscar De La Hoya because he's in the middle of negotiating with DAZN. So all of his leverage, all the pieces he has, all the fighters he have on his roster are very important for them to be there, because when you come to the table, you're going to leverage these guys' influence in the space to make an argument for why your distribution deal should be just as good as it was before, if not better than it was before, right? And Rick Meridian also went and responded and spoke to the idea that as a manager, of course, he has a place at the table, and that Oscar De La Hoya may have things misconstrued, and maybe Oscar De La Hoya doesn't realize that some of the things he said or some of the things he's done can be used against him as breach of contract. These guys will be in court litigating and trying to figure this out. I guess the big question at this point is going to be, how does this affect Vergil Ortiz moving forward? Is Vergil Ortiz going to be able to still make fights? Is this make the JARON Boots Ennis and Vergil Ortiz fight a fight that realistically can happen at the end of March? Can this still be put together with all of this happening in the background with Oscar De La Hoya and Vergil Ortiz? Litigations can drag out into years, multiple years. And what does that put Vergil Ortiz at? Does this stall up or freeze his career up a little bit as he's trying to figure out this whole situation? Now, Ryan Garcia has been upfront and tried everything you can imagine. He's badmouthed Oscar De La Hoya. He's challenged him on press conference floors. He's tried to operate outside of the contract, and Oscar De La Hoya has jumped in front of that with his own contract and understanding, and stopped Ryan Garcia from making fights overseas, or even with the Jake Paul situation was able to speak up front about not allowing Ryan Garcia to be involved in that as well. We've seen how Oscar can be. Will Vergil Ortiz be willing to sit on the sideline potentially as this litigates and figures itself out, and while his career stands still, or will they have to, meet somewhere in the middle and kind of find some common ground in order for Vergil Ortiz to still be active and still pursue his ambition on being a champion at 154? He's a fighter who's getting bigger. I could see Vergil Ortiz competing at 160 at some point in time. So how much time does Vergil Ortiz have on his side? Does he have the staying power to wait on the sideline while this gets figured out? Or, we'll see how that all turns out, right? You guys let me know what you think in the comment section. It is what it is, but it does seem, as the thumbnail says, where there is smoke, there is fire, and Oscar De La Hoya once again in the crosshairs of scrutiny as he's into it with another one of his fighters. Guys, until the next one, it's your boy Clay. This at ATP Combat Media. Guys, like I said earlier, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Until the next one, you know how we carry it. At this point, we out.